Hey Houston, Mario Santos here with our associate attorney, Ms. Eugenia Mendez.
Hi guys, welcome to our first episode of our Success Stories series.
So just a little brief intro here so you understand exactly what we're trying to do and our intent with this series. We want to make sure that we educate folks on what exactly it is that we do for individuals who may find themselves in a very difficult legal situation. It may vary depending on what allegations are being brought and how certain strategies are going to be applied and what we want to make sure that we take action on immediately. So for this particular series or this particular episode number 1 of this series, I want to make sure that I introduce you to a very good success story of ours for one of our clients. We had a very concerned father call our office, and he found himself in a position where his son was unfortunately facing a very serious felony, precisely a 3rd-degree felony that he had been charged with, assault of a disabled individual. His 18-year-old son identified as a transgender, and as everyone knows, there's quite a bit of bullies here nowadays, whether it be in schools, daycares, outside of the real world. And so in this particular situation, while his son was in school, son is walking towards the restroom and he has this bully that he encounters, and the bully begins calling him out in certain names in front of everyone. Our client resorted to, unfortunately, utilizing physical defense. And this led to, unfortunately, him being arrested and then getting charged and processed here in Harris County. However, the situation was that he was never formally given an explanation as to what he was going to be charged with. Rather, they only advised that they were conducting a criminal investigation. And weeks later after the fact, father contacts our office concerned about, look, what's going on? I got a call from a bonding company advising me that my son has an active arrest warrant. So we immediately wanted to make sure that we took action on that. We looked into the Harris County court records, and lo and behold, we did find out that there was an active arrest warrant that was pending. In those types of situations, we immediately try to figure out how can we take action where we don't have that individual end up getting arrested. So there's really small, limited amount of options that our clients have in those cases. One, they can either just simply turn themselves in, but that, it's a situation where it's going to be a lot slower, the process. They have to actually go through the jail system. They have to wait to be presented before a judge to be able to even obtain an actual amount of bond. Our efforts were taking the lesser burdensome route, which was in coordination with our client, getting in contact with the presiding judge, which unfortunately we found out was a very difficult judge that is present and presiding here in Harris County. We went before such judge, explained to the judge the situation, the fact that our client was only 18, he was still in school, explained briefly about our position that this was just simply an act of self-defense from an individual who was bullying our client and calling him out in certain names. The judge denied our request to give him what we call walkthrough bond, which is allowing the individual to avoid an arrest, coordinating with a bondsman representative, being there present, and immediately walking them over to the processing center to post such bond, whatever bond amount the judge sets. In this case, it was denied. There was no other way, no other alternative but to have our client turn himself in and await to be processed and await to be taken before a judge. So our efforts to try to make this as smooth and simple as possible, what we decided to go ahead and do is immediately have our client turn himself in, but strategically, not just simply going in, for example, 5 p.m. and then hoping that the following day we had an opportunity to go ahead and approach a judge. Rather, what we did is coordinate with the judge's coordinator and figure out, made sure, is this judge going to be here tomorrow? And if that's the case, once we confirmed that, we had our client not go in at 5 p.m., rather go in sometime around midnight. In this way, by the time that we approach a judge in the morning, we could then confirm that in their records, in their system, this person was already going to be reflecting as being in custody. In this way, we could immediately make sure that we took action, approaching the judge. Judge, can we please obtain a certain bond amount that's going to be reasonable enough for our client and his family to be able to post and get out? This way, we can then have the time to properly investigate, properly exercise due diligence in figuring out what kind of evidence does the state have in this situation. Can they even prove this case to begin with? This is where we wanted to make sure that we took action. Our client and his family was well informed every step of the way. We wanted to make sure that they felt comfortable with the process and that they knew that we were going to be making sure that we took care of the most important right, which I believe, is afforded to everyone in this country, the right to be presumed innocent, right? We were defending that in court and outside of court as well, making sure that at that time, it has not been a situation where the state has found him guilty. He has not been found guilty. The state has not met that burden just yet. We want to investigate this case. This is when we made sure that we then brought in our associate here, Kenya, which then began investigating this case. I believe, as a matter of fact, we actually got a surveillance video on that case. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did. So my job was to investigate the case and see all the evidence that was pending. One of the pieces of evidence that we had was a surveillance video from the high school in which our client attended. It had views from all different points, and it showed our client walking down the hallway. It showed our client entering the bathroom, but before he entered the bathroom, you could see the person who was bullying him walking behind him. You could see that the other individual was telling our client something. Our client goes into the bathroom for about maybe 5 seconds, comes back outside of the bathroom, but when the other individual yelled something to our client, the bathroom door hadn't closed. So it was a situation where I believe that our client heard what the other individual had told him. Like Mr. Santos had said, our client identifies as a transgender, and the other individual had made a derogatory statement to our client. You see our client come out of the bathroom, walk after the other individual, and hit him right in the face. After analyzing the video and all the evidence in this case, I sat down with Mario and we strategized on what was going to be the best resolution for our client. Once I felt like I had a good strategy in place, I decided to email the chief in the court that the case was pending in. I let him know that I was going to be showing up on the day of his court to talk about a good resolution. One of my biggest concerns was that the charge that he was charged with was assault to a disabled individual. The assault actually occurred. My client actually hit somebody for the derogatory statements that were made. And that was one of the biggest things that I wanted to point out to the DA. My client didn't just hit someone to hit somebody. My client hit somebody because he was being bullied. And that was my strategy. That was exactly when I wanted to get my point across. I sat down, I talked to the DA, and I told them, hey, you've got a bad case, in the sense that my client didn't hit anybody because he woke up that morning and said, I'm gonna go beat somebody up in school. My client woke up that morning, went to school, went about his regular routine, and was getting bullied. And you don't know how often my client was getting bullied. You didn't know how many derogatory statements people had made. And I think it got to the point where my client said enough was enough. And I told the DA that although we don't condone behavior like this, people shouldn't be out there bullying somebody because they identify in a different manner, they identify as a transgender or whatever they want to identify as. And the DA took it onto consideration. I reminded the prosecutor that day that my client was facing a third-degree felony. My client was 18 years old. He was still in high school. He didn't have an intention to go to school that day to beat anybody up. And I think that after I told him things about him, he kind of was leaning towards giving me a good resolution. And one of his questions was, well, he hit a disabled individual. The disabled individual was being categorized as this because he was autistic. And something that the district attorney didn't know was that my client was also autistic. And it wasn't just my client going to school beating on somebody that was autistic. It was this autistic kid bullying my client, who is also on the spectrum, for identifying as a transgender. And then therefore I was able to convince the district attorney to give me a good resolution on the case. The district attorney decided to give me a decision-making class for a dismissal.
This will hopefully better educate our client to not put himself in this position, rather, have better responses to whenever he does come across that situation where there's another bully out there. And that resolution ultimately allowed us to get the felony case, dismissed, which that is a fantastic result. Everyone walked away happy. Everyone is a better individual out of this outcome. And hopefully this will never happen again in the future. So this types of outcomes is really what we aim for, what we strive for, what we're passionate about. We want to make sure that we try to get that resolution for each case. But As we've said it before, if you've heard me before, it really comes down to what exactly is the evidence that the state has. What can we use to try and paint the best picture here to hopefully get to that resolution? This is just one episode of our success stories. This is one dismissal out of many that we're going to make sure that we introduce you to. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, any concerns, please let us know in the comments section. We want to make sure that we provide engaging content for you guys to go ahead and consider and analyze.